Ethan Carter stepped out of the old car he had borrowed from a friend, slamming the door shut with more force than necessary. He stood still for a moment, taking in the sight of his hometown after 10 long years. Everything looked smaller now, like the town itself had shrunk while he was away. The streets were quieter, the houses seemed older, and the air carried a faint smell of damp earth and pine trees. It wasn't just the place that felt different, it was him too. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his leather jacket, feeling the weight of memories pressing down on him. This trip wasn't supposed to happen. For years, Ethan had avoided coming back here, avoiding the pain and guilt that came with thinking about Lily. But something inside him had changed recently. Maybe it was the dreams he'd been having, the same ones over and over again. Dreams where he heard her voice calling his name, clear as day, even though she had been gone for so long. Or maybe it was the nagging feeling that he hadn't done enough to find out what really happened to her. Whatever it was, it brought him back to this place, standing in front of the house he grew up in. The house looked the same, but emptier somehow. The white paint was peeling and the porch swing creaked softly in the breeze. His parents weren't home, they rarely left the house these days, but he didn't come to see them anyway. He came because there was something he needed to do, something he should have done years ago. Ethan walked around the side of the house to the shed. It was locked, but the lock was rusty and easy to break. Inside, he found what he was looking for, a shovel leaning against the wall, its wooden handle cracked in places. He picked it up, testing its weight. It felt heavier than he remembered, but it would work. Without giving himself time to think twice, he got back into the car and drove toward the cemetery on the edge of town. The cemetery was surrounded by tall oak trees, their branches stretching out like skeletal fingers. It was quiet here, almost unnaturally so. Ethan parked the car and stepped out, clutching the shovel tightly. As he made his way through the rows of headstones, he couldn't help but notice how many names he recognized. People he used to know, or at least thought he knew, were buried here now. Time moved differently in this town, it seemed. Everyone stayed and everyone eventually ended up in this place. Finally, he reached the spot he was looking for. There it was, a simple gray headstone with her name carved into it. Lily Carter. Below her name were the dates of her birth and death, marking the short 16 years she had lived. Ethan stared at the stone, his chest tightening. He had visited this grave once before, right after the funeral. Back then, he had been too numb to feel anything. Now, standing here again after all this time, the emotions hit him full force. Guilt, anger, sadness. All of it swirled together until he could barely breathe. For a moment, he considered turning back. What was he doing here? Digging up a coffin wasn't going to bring her back, it wouldn't change anything. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Something didn't add up about Lily's death. The official story was that she had died in an accident, a fall from a treehouse in the woods, but Ethan never believed it. Not completely. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things his parents refused to talk about. And those dreams. They felt real, like she was trying to tell him something. Taking a deep breath, Ethan set the shovel down and started digging. The ground was hard and unforgiving, making every strike of the shovel feel like a battle. Dirt flew up around him, coating his shoes and pants. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cool evening air. Still, he kept going, driven by a mixture of desperation and resolve. Each shovelful brought him closer to the truth, or so he hoped. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the cemetery. Finally, the shovel struck something solid. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Carefully, he cleared away the remaining dirt, revealing the top of the coffin. It was plain and unremarkable, just like the headstone above it. For a moment, he hesitated, wondering if he was ready for whatever lay inside. With trembling hands, Ethan pried open the lid of the coffin. What he saw, or rather what he didn't see, left him stunned. The coffin was empty. There was no body, no remains of the sister he had mourned for 10 years. Instead, there were 3 objects lying neatly inside: a small leather-bound journal, a faded photograph, and a strange metallic bracelet. Ethan picked up each item one by one, examining them closely. The journal was worn, its pages yellowed with age. The photograph showed Lily smiling brightly, standing next to someone Ethan didn't recognize. And the bracelet? It looked alien, almost futuristic, with intricate patterns etched into its surface. Ethan sat back on his heels, his mind racing. None of this made sense. If Lily wasn't here, then where was she? And why had everyone told him she was dead? Questions swirled in his head. But one thing was certain. He wasn't leaving until he found answers. Little did he know. This discovery was only the beginning of a journey that would uncover secrets darker than he could have imagined. Ethan sat on the edge of his childhood bed, staring at the strange objects he had taken from Lily's coffin. The leather journal, the photograph, and the metallic bracelet lay scattered across the worn quilt like pieces of a puzzle he wasn't sure how to solve. His mind raced with questions. Why would someone bury these things instead of her body? What did they mean? And most importantly, where was Lily? The room felt smaller than he remembered, almost suffocating. The walls were still painted the same pale blue they had been when he was a kid, but now they seemed faded and lifeless. He glanced around at the familiar furniture, the dresser covered in dust, the desk stacked with old school books, and wondered if coming back here had been a mistake. Everything about this place reminded him of her. Her laughter echoed in his memory, haunting him even though she hadn't been home in over a decade. Taking a deep breath, Ethan reached for the journal first. It felt fragile in his hands, like it might crumble if he handled it too roughly. He opened it carefully, flipping through the pages until he found the first entry. The handwriting was unmistakably Lily's, neat yet hurried, full of energy. As he began reading, he realized the words weren't just random thoughts. They were clues to what had happened to her. In the earliest entries, Lily wrote about feeling uneasy. She mentioned hearing strange noises late at night, whispers that no one else seemed to notice. "It's like someone's watching me," she wrote. "I can feel it all the time." At first, Ethan thought she might have been imagining things, but as he read further, her tone became more urgent. She talked about seeing shadows moving in the woods near their house and finding odd symbols carved into trees. One entry described a conversation she overheard between their parents and some strangers. "They said something about the experiment," she wrote. "Whatever it is, it scares me." Ethan paused, gripping the journal tightly. An experiment? That didn't sound like any accident. He flipped ahead, skipping over mundane details about school and friends, searching for answers. Near the middle of the journal, Lily's writing changed. It became darker, angrier. She talked about discovering secrets about their town, things people didn't want her to know. "I think I understand now," she wrote in one entry. "They're using us, testing something dangerous. But I won't let them keep lying to everyone. I'll find proof." Her final entry sent chills down Ethan's spine. "They know I'm onto them," she wrote. "I don't know who to trust anymore. Mom and Dad won't listen. They act like I'm crazy. But I can't stop looking. If something happens to me, promise you'll figure it out. Promise you won't forget me." The last sentence was scrawled hastily, almost like she'd written it in a rush. "They took me because I knew too much." Ethan closed the journal, his hands trembling. His sister hadn't died in an accident. Someone had taken her. But who? And why? He picked up the photograph next, studying it closely. In the picture, Lily stood beside a girl Ethan didn't recognize. Both of them were smiling brightly, posing in front of a treehouse in the woods. The other girl looked about Lily's age, with curly brown hair and freckles dotting her cheeks. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Lily plus Grace, Summer '08, Grace." The name meant nothing to Ethan, but it gave him a lead. Whoever this girl was, she might know something. Maybe she could explain what Lily had been talking about in her journal. With renewed determination, Ethan tucked the photograph into his pocket and turned his attention to the third object. The bracelet. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Made of smooth, silvery metal. It was etched with tiny patterns that shimmered faintly in the lamplight. When he touched it, the surface felt cool and slightly electric, sending a tingling sensation up his arm. He examined it closely, trying to figure out its purpose. Was it some kind of device? A key? Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't ordinary. Ethan set the bracelet aside and leaned back against the wall, letting everything sink in. This wasn't just about finding out what happened to Lily anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind whatever conspiracy she had stumbled upon. He couldn't do it alone, though. He needed help. The next morning, Ethan went to the local diner hoping to gather information. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and gossip spread faster than wildfire. He ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth, scanning the room for anyone who might remember Lily or the girl in the photograph. After a few minutes, an older waitress approached his table, refilling his cup without asking. "You look familiar," she said, squinting at him. "You used to live here, didn't you?" "Yeah," Ethan replied, forcing a smile. "I grew up here. My name's Ethan Carter." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, right. You're Lily's brother." Her voice softened. "We all miss her. Around here. Such a shame what happened." Ethan nodded, pretending to agree while filing away her reaction. If she really believed Lily was dead, then she probably didn't know anything useful. Still, he decided to ask. "Do you remember a girl named Grace? She was friends with Lily back in high school." The waitress frowned, thinking, "Grace Monroe? Yeah, I think so. She moved away years ago. Last I heard, she lived out by Willow Creek. Keeps to herself mostly." Willow Creek was only a few miles outside of town. It wasn't much to go on, but it was better than nothing. Ethan thanked the waitress and left the diner, heading straight for his car. As he drove toward Willow Creek, he replayed everything he'd learned so far in his head. The whispers, the symbols, the experiments. It all sounded crazy, like something out of a movie. But deep down, he knew it was real. Lily wouldn't have made it up. When he arrived at Willow Creek, Ethan spotted a small cabin nestled among the trees. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and a rusty pickup truck was parked. Outside, he knocked on the door, half expecting no one to answer. To his surprise, a woman opened it moments later. She looked to be in her late 20s, with curly brown hair and familiar freckles. It was the girl from the photograph. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously, eyeing him up and down. Ethan held up the picture. "Do you know who this is?" Grace's expression shifted instantly. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by something else. Fear. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "It was in my sister's coffin," Ethan said bluntly. "She's not there, Grace. Someone buried those things instead of her body. I need to know what happened." For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, she stepped aside and gestured for him to come inside. The cabin smelled like pine and smoke, a comforting scent that didn't quite match the tension filling the room. Ethan sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, gripping the photograph tightly in his hands. Grace stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed over her chest, staring at him with a mixture of fear and hesitation. The metallic bracelet lay on the coffee table between them, catching the soft glow of the lamplight. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, the silence stretching, so thin it felt like it might snap. Finally, Grace broke the quiet. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice low but firm. "This isn't something you can fix, Ethan. It's bigger than both of us." Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling up inside him. "I'm not leaving until I know what happened to my sister," he said. "Lily wrote about you in her journal. She trusted you. Whatever she found out, whatever got her taken, don't you think I deserve to know?" Grace sighed deeply, running a hand through her curly hair. She looked older now than she did in the photograph, her freckled face lined with worry. For a moment she seemed to debate whether or not to say anything. Then she walked over to the couch and sat down across from him, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "Fine," she said quietly. "But you need to understand something. First, this town, it's not what it seems. There are secrets here that people would kill to protect. Literally. Ethan's stomach tightened. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it feel more real and more dangerous. "What kind of secrets?" he asked. Grace glanced toward the window, as if checking to make sure no one was watching. Years ago, some big corporation came to town. They called themselves the Vale. At first, everyone thought they were just another company setting up shop, maybe building factories or something. But it wasn't like that. They started buying land, paying off locals, and recruiting people to work for them. No one really knew what they were doing, but rumors spread fast. People talked about experiments, things that sounded crazy at the time. "Experiments?" Ethan repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace nodded. "Yeah, stuff involving life and death. Pushing boundaries nobody should touch. Some people thought they were trying to find cures for diseases, but others believed they were messing with things way beyond science, like bringing people back from the dead." Ethan stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. It sounded insane, like something out of a horror movie, but then again, so did everything else he'd discovered since opening Lily's coffin. "Lily figured it out," Grace continued. "She was always curious, always asking questions. One day she told me she'd found proof. Documents, files, stuff she wasn't supposed to see. She wanted to expose them, to show everyone what was really going on. But before she could, she disappeared." Ethan's heart sank. Disappeared. Not dead. That word hit harder than any other explanation he'd imagined. "So she's alive?" he asked hesitantly. Grace hesitated, her eyes flickering away from his. "I don't know," she admitted. "That's the thing, nobody does. Nobody. After she vanished, your parents told everyone she died in an accident. They even held a funeral. But I never believed it. I tried looking into it myself, but every lead went cold. And then..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "And then..." "What?" Ethan pressed. "And then I realized I was being watched," Grace said, her voice dropping even lower. "People warned me to stop digging, told me I'd end up like Lily if I kept poking around. So I left town, moved out here to get away from it all. I've been lying low ever since." Ethan leaned back against the couch, his mind racing. If what Grace said was true, then Lily wasn't just missing. She was caught up in something far darker and more complicated than he'd imagined. And whoever was behind it clearly didn't want anyone finding out the truth. "What about this?" he asked, pointing to the metallic bracelet on the table. "Do you know what it is?" Grace picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands. "It looks like one of their devices," she said. "I've seen pictures of similar things in the files Lily showed me. They're supposed to manipulate consciousness somehow, keep people trapped between life and death, like a limbo state." Ethan's blood ran cold. Trapped between life and death? Was that where Lily was now? The thought made him sick to his stomach, but it also gave him hope. If she wasn't truly gone, then there was still a chance to save her. "I need to find her," Ethan said firmly. "Where do I start?" Grace looked at him, her expression torn between admiration and pity. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Not until I bring her home." Grace sighed again, rubbing her temples like she was trying to ward off a headache. "Okay," she said finally. "There's an old factory on the outskirts of town. It's abandoned now, but Lily used to sneak in there sometimes." She said, "It was connected to the Vale somehow. If you're serious about this, that's where you should look." Ethan stood up, determination hardening his features. "Thanks," he said, "for telling me all this." Grace nodded, standing as well. "Just be careful," she warned. "These people, they'll do anything to protect their secrets. Don't underestimate them." With that, Ethan grabbed the bracelet and headed for the door. As he stepped outside, the cool night air hit him like a slap, grounding him in the reality of what he was about to do. He climbed into his car and drove back toward town, his mind spinning with plans and possibilities. When he reached the factory, he parked a short distance away and approached on foot. The building loomed ahead of him, its windows shattered, and, Walls covered in graffiti. Weeds grew through cracks in the pavement, giving it an abandoned, ghostly feel. Ethan slipped inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The interior was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of broken glass beneath his boots. He moved cautiously, searching for anything that might give him answers. In one corner of the main room, he found a pile of old documents scattered across the floor. Kneeling down, he sifted through them, his heart pounding as he recognized names and phrases from Lily's journal. Suddenly he heard a noise, a faint creak, like someone stepping on loose floorboards. Ethan froze, his flashlight beam sweeping the room. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. No one answered, but the feeling of being watched crept over him like a shadow. He knew he wasn't alone. Clutching the flashlight tightly, he pressed on, determined to uncover whatever secrets this place held. Somewhere in the darkness, he felt closer to finding Lily, and the truth everyone had worked so hard to hide. Ethan's flashlight flickered as he moved deeper into the factory, its beam barely cutting through the thick darkness. The air smelled damp and metallic like rust and old machinery. His footsteps echoed softly against the crumbling walls, each sound making him flinch. He wasn't sure what he expected to find here, a clue, a map, maybe even Lily herself, but every step felt heavier than the last. Whatever was hidden in this place, it wasn't meant to be found. He reached a narrow staircase leading downward, its steps slick with grime. At the bottom, he found himself in a long corridor lit by dim fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The walls were lined with pipes and wires, some sparking occasionally, giving the whole area an unsettling vibe. Ethan followed the hallway cautiously, his heart pounding harder with every turn. He could feel the weight of secrets pressing down on him, secrets that had been buried for years. At the end of the corridor, he came across a heavy steel door marked with a symbol he recognized, the same pattern etched into the bracelet he'd taken from Lily's coffin. It looked almost alien, intricate and unnatural. Taking a deep breath, Ethan pushed the door open, revealing a massive underground lab. The sight took his breath away. The room was filled with advanced equipment, glowing monitors, humming machines, and panels covered in blinking lights and strange symbols. But what caught his attention immediately was the centerpiece, a large transparent pod in the middle of the room. Inside it lay a figure Ethan would have recognized anywhere. Lily. She looked exactly as he remembered her, except paler, almost translucent, with wires and tubes connecting her body to the machine. Her chest rose and fell slowly, as if she were sleeping. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. His legs felt rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Was she alive? Dead? Something in between? He stepped closer, his hand instinctively reaching out toward the pod. That's when he noticed the screen mounted beside it. Rows of data scrolled across the display, tracking vital signs and brain activity. A label at the top read, Subject L16, State, Suspended. Suspended, Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. What does that even mean? Before he could think further, a mechanical voice broke the silence. Unauthorized access detected. Ethan spun around just in time to see a group of men in black uniforms rushing into the room. They wore helmets with visors that obscured their faces, making them look more like robots than humans. One of them raised a device that emitted a high-pitched whine, causing Ethan to stagger backward and clutch his ears. Another grabbed him, roughly by the arm, pinning him against the wall. "What are you doing here?" demanded one of the men, his tone cold and commanding. "How did you find this facility?" Ethan struggled against the grip holding him, but it was useless. "That's my sister," he shouted, nodding toward the pod. "You've got no right to keep her here." The leader of the group exchanged glances with his comrades before turning back to Ethan. "Your sister made choices that led her here," he said flatly. "She interfered with matters beyond her understanding. This is not your concern." "My concern?" Ethan spat, anger boiling inside him. "She's my family. You can't just lock her up like some experiment." The man ignored him, signaling for the others to escort Ethan out of the room. As they dragged him away, Ethan caught one last glimpse of Lily lying motionless in the pod. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision. He couldn't leave. Her, not again. Not after finally finding her. Once outside the lab, the men shoved Ethan into a small holding cell. It was bare except for a single chair bolted to the floor. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving him alone in the dim light. For a while he sat there, replaying everything that had happened. He thought about Grace's warnings, about the rumors of experiments and people being kept alive, or something close to it, in limbo. And he thought about Lily, trapped in that pod, unaware of how hard he'd fought to find her. But sitting there wouldn't help. He needed a plan. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed distorted in the sterile confines of the cell. Just when Ethan began to lose hope, the door creaked open. To his surprise, Grace stood there, her face pale but determined. "I told you to be careful," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Guess I should have known better." "How did you get here?" Ethan asked, standing. Up quickly, Grace held up a keycard. "I still have connections in town. When you didn't come back, I figured you might need backup. Lucky for you, I know this place pretty well." Ethan nodded gratefully. "We have to go back for Lily. There's no way I'm leaving without her." Grace hesitated, biting her lip. "It won't be easy. They'll have security everywhere now, but..." She trailed off, pulling something from her pocket. It was another bracelet, identical to the one Ethan carried. "If we use these, we might be able to override the system keeping her suspended. At least that's what Lily believed." Together, they crept back through the corridors, avoiding patrols and using hidden passageways Grace knew from her own investigations years ago. When they reached the lab, Ethan froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the sight of Lily still lying in the pod. Grace nudged him gently. "Focus," she whispered. "We don't have much time." They worked quickly, inserting the bracelets into slots on the control panel. The machines hummed louder, lights flashing erratically as the system began to reboot. Alarms blared suddenly, red warning signals illuminating the room. "They're coming," Grace shouted, checking the doorway nervously. Ethan ignored the noise, focusing on the task at hand. Finally, the pod's lid slid open with a hiss. Lily stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Ethan rushed to her side, helping her sit up. She blinked groggily, looking confused but alive. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice weak but unmistakable. "It's me," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm here. We're getting you out of this place." Lily clung to him as Grace helped disconnect the remaining wires. "We need to go. Now," Grace urged, already heading for the exit. As they fled the lab, armed guards appeared, blocking their path. Ethan shielded Lily with his body, panic rising in his chest. But then Grace activated a fail-safe program she'd discovered during her research. The entire facility began to collapse around them, sparks flying and debris falling from the ceiling. "This way," Grace yelled, leading them through a narrow tunnel. They emerged into the cool night air, gasping for breath as the ground shook beneath their feet. Behind them, the factory crumbled into ruins, taking the Veil's secrets with it. For now, Ethan wrapped an arm around Lily, holding her tightly as they stumbled away from the destruction. For the first time in 10 years, he felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't safe yet, but they were together. And that was enough to start over. The morning sun broke through the clouds, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ethan held Lily's hand tightly as they walked down the dusty road, their steps slow but steady. Grace followed a few paces behind, keeping watch for any signs of pursuit. None of them spoke much, there wasn't much to say. They were alive, together, and free for now. But the weight of what had happened still hung heavy in the air, like a storm that hadn't fully passed. Lily leaned on Ethan, her legs shaky after years of being suspended in that strange state. She looked thinner than he remembered, almost fragile, but her eyes sparkled with determination. Every so often she glanced back at the column of smoke rising from the remains of the factory, her expression unreadable. Ethan didn't ask her what she was thinking. He figured she needed time to process everything just like he did. After walking for nearly an hour, they reached a clearing where the trees thinned out, revealing a wide open field bathed in sunlight. It felt like a different world compared to the dark, suffocating underground lab they'd escaped. Here the air smelled fresh and birds chirped cheerfully in the distance. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to believe they might actually make it out of this nightmare. "Where do we go now?" Lily asked softly, breaking the silence. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Away from here," he said finally. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find us." Grace nodded in agreement. "We should split up soon," she suggested. "It'll be harder for them to track all of us if we're not traveling together." "No," Ethan said firmly, shaking his head. "Not yet. We stick together until we're sure they're not following us." Grace didn't argue, though Ethan could tell she wanted to. Instead, she simply adjusted the backpack slung over her shoulder and scanned the horizon again. She had risked everything to help them escape, and Ethan knew he owed her more gratitude than he could ever express. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that trusting anyone, even Grace, was dangerous right now. As the hours passed, Lily grew stronger, regaining some of her energy with each step. Occasionally, she would ask questions about what had happened during her absence, how life had changed, who else knew about the veil, whether their parents truly believed she was dead. Ethan answered as honestly as he could, though many of his responses only led to more questions. "What will we do when we leave town?" Lily asked eventually, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't even know where to start." "We'll figure it out," Ethan reassured her. "One step at a time. First, we need to get far away from here. Then we can decide what comes next." Lily nodded, though her grip on his hand tightened slightly. Ethan understood why she was scared. After spending 10 years trapped in limbo, waking up to find the world completely changed must have been overwhelming, but she was resilient. He'd always known that about her, and he trusted that she would adapt. By midday, they reached the edge of the forest, where the road met the highway leading out of town. Cars sped past, oblivious to the three figures, standing on the shoulder. Ethan flagged one down, explaining that their car had broken down and asking for a ride to the nearest bus station. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, agreed without hesitation. As they climbed into the back seat, Ethan felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. At the bus station, Grace pulled Ethan aside while Lily waited nearby. "This is where I leave you," she said quietly. "You two need space to heal, and I need to disappear before they come looking for me." Ethan frowned, guilt twisting in his chest. "Are you sure? You've done so much already." Grace cut him off with a small smile. "It's okay. I knew the risks when I got involved. Besides, I have my own reasons for wanting to stay off their radar." She handed him a folded piece of paper. "Here's a number you can reach me at if you ever need help. Don't use it unless it's absolutely necessary." Ethan took the paper, nodding solemnly. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Grace gave him a quick hug before turning to Lily. "Take care of yourself," she said warmly. "And don't let your brother get into too much trouble." Lily smiled, weakly. "I'll try." With that, Grace disappeared into the crowd, leaving Ethan and Lily alone. They boarded the next bus heading out of town, taking seats near the window. As the vehicle pulled away, Ethan watched the familiar streets shrink into the distance. Part of him felt sad to leave. It was home, after all. But another part felt lighter, freer. For the rest of the ride, Lily rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, drifting in and out of sleep. He kept his arm around her protectively, vowing silently never to let anything happen to her again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. When the bus finally arrived at its destination, a small city several hours away, they stepped off into the bustling streets, surrounded by strangers. Ethan glanced at Lily, meeting her gaze. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Let's go." And with that, they began their new journey, ready to build a future far removed from the shadows of their past.